Welcome to this video on how to convert your notes and highlights to flashcards using Dendro. If you're used to using flashcards, you'll know that they're great for remembering things. But sometimes the hard thing is actually making the flashcards in the first place. Although many people use shared flashcards, where they're made by one person and used by many people, it's actually a lot more effective for your learning to be making flashcards out of the very things that you yourself are learning. That gives lots of context to the flashcards and make sure that what you're practicing in those flashcards actually relates to what you want to know. So, a lot of us already make notes or take highlights. And with Dendro, you can actually convert those notes and highlights into flashcards. This process means that instead of jumping straight to the part where you're trying to memorize things, first you take some time to make sure you really understand what you're memorizing. You also have the opportunity to get rid of a lot of notes and highlights that initially seemed useful but turn out not to be actually that useful. And that way you end up with less flashcards but better ones. So let's see what that actually looks like in Dendro. So here I am logged into my brand new Dendro account, and what I need to start off by doing is adding my notes into the program. So to do that, we add a new source. The source we're going to add is a text source, and what I'm actually putting in here is I've copied out my notes from my Kindle notebook, and I'm just going to paste all of them here. So these are a bunch of highlights. It says there's 213 highlights from this book that I read recently called 4,000 Weeks. And I really enjoyed it, and I made a lot of highlights that I want to remember from it. So now that I've got my notes in there, I will copy in the title up here and the author here so I know where all these notes came from. And then I'm going to add a tag that describes what this is all about. Now, there's different ways I could sort of describe what this book is about, but one way is time management. In a way, it's an anti-time management book, but that's okay, we'll use that for now. So if I save that, I now come to this screen, which gives me a few more options for what to do with my notes. Now, the way Dendro works is once you've added in some sources, now you can see we've got some stats on the front page here, we click engage. So suppose we'd added in notes from 10 different books, we click engage and it chooses one of those sources to show us. So now I've got a lot of notes in this one page, and that's okay. We don't have to deal with all of them at once, and that's one of the nice things about dealing with them in Dendro. But how are we going to convert these notes to flashcards? Well, firstly, we want to split out different sections depending on what's in them. So if I read this here, the first note and the second note are quite different, so I'm going to clip those into different sections. So I'm going to highlight and click add note. I'm going to highlight this one. When I look at it, it's saying 310,000 weeks, I remember that from the book, is the approximate duration of all human civilization. So that was just an interesting fact. I thought, yeah, I'll keep that one. So I'll add note. Now this seemed kind of interesting at the time, but now that I read it, it's not saying that much. So I'm actually going to not do anything with it. I'm going to ignore it and move on. Again, that actually saves me so much time, because if I'd created a flashcard from that straight away, I'd be practicing things forevermore that I don't really find that valuable. So this is an opportunity for me to ignore some things. Okay, so this one's interesting. It says surveys on busyness understate the scale of busyness because many people are too busy to actually do the surveys. right? I think that's kind of interesting, not super important, but kind of funny. So I'm going to highlight that out. And then there's heaps more to go through, but I'm actually just going to bookmark where I'm up to. And that means I can come back later and keep processing these notes. Okay. Also, you can see I last saw this page today, and if I hover over next, it says I'm next going to see this in 2 days. So it's not going to disappear forever. I'm going to get a chance to come back to that and keep processing, but for now I'm going to click next and move on. Now what this is actually showing me is a note from that book 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman, right? But it's just showing me that one note. And now I have the opportunity to have a look at what this note is saying, right? Take it, refine it, and make sure it's saying something actually useful and meaningful before I try and memorize the ideas in it, because they might not be useful to memorize, right? So let me have a look. I like to break up paragraphs into sentences, just like space them out a bit so I can see what's going on. Now it says, we can make infinitely ambitious plans, but we often don't have the time to put them into action. Makes sense. And then we have a quote from Seneca, the Roman philosopher. And it's from a book called, here we go, a letter titled On the Shortness of Life. Now, often with quotes, I like to put them a little bit more simply in the references, so I'm just going to write it like this and get rid of all those extra words, right? And then put this in italics. And I think this quote is something kind of separate, so I'm going to add note. Now that has just been separated from the parent node. I can see that if I go to view the tree, alright, so I've got the original source with all the notes, then we'd clipped out this note that we were just looking at, and now I've clipped out this quote by Seneca. Alright, so that's something that is a note that I might want to turn into flashcards later. For example, I might want to say, who said this? Now, if I want to remember who said this quote, or who wrote this, what I can do is I can highlight the answer. In this case, it's Seneca, but there's different ways I can create this answer here. For now, I'm just going to say highlight Seneca and click Add Task. Now what this is going to do is it's going to create automatically a question and answer flashcard. Okay, so the window's a bit small here, but we can see that we have the initial quote, and then underneath we have a box that says who was this, and the answer is Seneca. Now, as you can see, I've started off with those that very long page of highlights and notes, right? And those happen to be notes from Kindle, but they could be from any source really. And incrementally, I've clipped out some useful ideas, then I've simplified them down, I've broken them down even further just to find the very bits I care about remembering, and then I've used Add Task to highlight a word and create a question answer flashcard. Now if I save that, that's just created a flashcard, which at some point, it's probably going to come to me in a few days. When I click next, it's going to show me that. But if we're in a hurry to see what just happened, let's go to view tree and see we have this orange one now. That's a T for task. This is what it looks like. This space that has been granted to us rushes by so speedily and so swiftly that all save a very few find life at an end just when they're getting ready to live. Now, who said this? It was a Roman philosopher. I think his name was Seneca. Correct? So I'm going to give myself a good grade. And now that's going to show that question to me in 2 days. Now again, I didn't have to go through the tree and find this. It will actually just show it to me just by clicking next. Alright, it adds it to the feed. But now we've seen how we can go from a page with all our notes. Okay, again, these were highlights that I copied from a Kindle book, but you can do this from notes that you take in class, or notes that you take while you're reading a book, or notes that you took after you had a great conversation with someone or a meeting. And then once you've added it to Dendro, it'll schedule it so you don't forget to come back to those notes. And when you come back to them, you can clip out parts that are useful using add note, and then you can, once you've simplified down those notes, use add task to create flashcards. If that looks like a process that you would find useful, then sign up today for your free Dendro trial account and try it out for yourself.